Welcome to DeckShock MTG. My name is Ganesh, and today we'll be checking out the incredible top 16 of this tournament I won. There were some really spicy decks and cards there you probably haven't seen before, and I can't wait to share them with you. So here we are. This tournament was called the Skirmish. It was in Kilgore, Texas, about 2 hours away from me. And the shop there was actually super cool. It's called Dragon's Nest, so I definitely recommend checking it out sometime if you're ever in the area. Here is a picture of me right after the win. There's me, and then the other top 4 players. This gentleman was second, and then Rex, my friend, was third, and then he was fourth. You can see here we have Sisse, Talan, myself on blue farm, and then another Sisse. So here's the top 16 bracket. There's some really cool decks I want to go over here. So we'll go from 16th all the way up to 1st, and we'll go ahead and start with a trap. The 15th and 16th happen to both be on the exact same list. I guess they were friends or something. So they were all running the same cards. This list is somewhat standard for an Atraxa list. There were some pretty interesting cards I noticed though. For one, we're seeing a lot more clone effects in the meta. So for example, Flesh Duplicate is starting to see a lot more play. And then we also have Phyrexian Metamorph here, which is also a pretty good card because you can tutor it with Enlightened Tutor. And it can also copy artifacts. So the One Ring, and other value artifacts you can copy with Phyrexian Metamorph. The main win cons of this deck are going to be Teferi Kitten. So if you have Teferi out and Kitten out, you can, and any free mana rock, you can infinitely drop through your deck as you choose. And then we also have the classic Thoracle combo, as well as in the enchantment zone, we have our trusty food chain with Mist Hollow Griffin, which then let us draw through our deck. Another interesting to include here was Talan the Kindly Lord. We're seeing this card pop up in a lot of lists, and as I go through more of the decks here, you'll see this card pop up more and more. Next, at 14th here, we have Kinnan. So this is a pretty somewhat standard Kinnan list. You have a lot of these heavy hitters. Also Consecrated Sphinx, which we are seeing more and more. This card was actually very impactful also. Jin Gitaxias Progress Tyrant. This player was able to cast this against me in top 16, and it was fairly impactful, although I was able to kill it. So this list looks to me more combo focused because he is running Freed from the Rail and Heaven's Aura. Not all Kinnan lists are on those, I believe, but this one definitely seems to be on it. Some of the spicier includes I noticed in this list were Song of the Dryads. This is a universal removal spell. It's pretty cool. I wouldn't really run it maybe, but the fact that it can hit anything makes it a good flexible card, I guess. Another interesting card I saw in this list was, if I can find it here, Agatha's Soul Cauldron. This card has also been popping up in a lot of lists. It's actually very powerful, I think, in cEDH. The fact that you can exile, say, a Ranger Captain or any other value creature with an activated ability makes this card very powerful because you can turn all of your creatures into whatever you want. So that was Kinnan. Next up, we have this Tivit list in 13th. So this is a pretty standard Tivit list, but there were a few interesting includes I wanted to show. So for one, there's Counterbalance. This is a pretty hard control card. It's a little weird seeing it in Tivit, but it definitely does make sense as to why you might want it. Another very interesting card I saw was Sir Ginger. Now, this card does not see play in almost any cEDH decks, but I can see why it would. So it has whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sir Ginger and scry 1, and it gets hexproof and haste as long as the opponent controls a planeswalker, which isn't going to trigger too much of the time. But in Tivit, this card can actually get really big really quickly, because that deck usually makes 5 artifacts a turn. So if you're sacking all of them, this is going to get really big really quick and just start killing people. The way this deck is going to win is just the standard time sieve combo. You're going to try to 2 this out, take infinite turns, or you're going to go for the very classic Thassa's Oracle. Next up, we have Malcolm Vial Smasher. I'm actually a huge fan of this deck. I think it's really cool. A lot of these cards that they included were very interesting, like for example, Hostage Taker. So this deck is also running a lot of the clone effects. Here we have Phantasmal Image and Metamorph. So the main win con of this deck seems to be Broodlord. I see a lot of cards in this list focused around Broodlord. Like there's a bunch of, there's an Entomb effect, I think, or no, that's a different one. But there is a Reanimate, there's a Sacrifice, there's a pile with supporting Broodlord in these cards that lets you combo out your deck here. And then there's also this card, which I thought was really interesting, Hostage Taker. I assume this combos in some way with Hoarding Broodlord because it gives the card that you cast from exile Convoke. So you're probably able to cheat this out in some way, some combo. Another interesting include was Shieldred. It's a card we're seeing pop up more and more as these games are going longer. Life is starting to really matter in these games, so Shieldred is definitely a card you should keep an eye out for. Last main win con of this deck is going to be, of course, Thoracle, but also Glinthorn. So Glinthorn and Malcolm, as we all know, is an infinite damage combo, or at least as many cards as you have in your deck. And then he is also on Moon Betrayal, which can win you the game here, which draws you a bunch of cards. And of course, classic Underworld Breach. Then we have some more reanimate effects for what I'm assuming is Broodlord. So very cool deck. I didn't actually get to play against this, but this list is actually really cool. I'd recommend checking it out. And there's the Entomb. Next up, we have Inala. I'm not the most experienced on Inala, but there's certainly some very cool cards here. The main win cons for this deck are going to be Spellseeker lines. So you'll play Spellseeker, you'll pay 1 with Inala's ability here, and then get a copy, and so you can go and grab any 2 instants or sorceries, mana cost 2 or less. So you can go get like a Flicker spell, and then from there you just kind of grab this weird line you can. There's some really interesting cards here that I haven't seen much in cEDH at all. Aghadir's Awakening is a bolt land, so it's going to shock you for 3 if you want it to come in untapped. And the backside is just a big reanimation spell. I imagine this in the late game, if you're able to res Spellseeker or Archaeomancer or a few other of these wizards, you'll just win the game because you can it just gets so much value off of paying 1 extra mana for each of them and getting more copies. Finale of Promise is also pretty cool in that you can res your instants and sorceries. And I imagine there's a few lines with a bunch of these instants and sorceries where you resurrect your wizards or you song half them and you make more of them. Yep, there's an Essence Flux, and you kind of win that way by tutoring through your deck. Another really interesting include I haven't seen in a lot of decks here was Rakta's Charm. I feel like we might see this card more in general. This card is very impactful in that it can stop someone from going off the breach. It can kill a hate piece like Null Rod that's really stopping you, or it can even kill, like, say, a Nagila, where you make them take 1 damage for every warrior. If they're going off, they're just going to die, because they're going to have more than 40 warriors. So that was definitely a very interesting list. I haven't seen a lot of Inalas, and I was definitely interested to play against this one in the top 16. So this is the first sliver. So this is a very classic food chain deck. The commander is mostly there just for the colors, it seems. I mean, yes, it's nice that you cascade when you play it, and it's a 7/7, but from what I can tell, it's mostly just as a food chain outlet. You know, it's arguable whether or not maybe Atraxa would be better at this specific strategy, but the deck performed well. Clearly, this person made top 16. It's a fairly standard food chain list, but this player did actually manage to pack in a lot of win cons into this deck, which kind of surprised me as to how many different win cons there were. So we have Hermit Druid here. So they'll try to mill out their library and then resurrect Thoracle here. And then also they have the Thoracle consultation line as well. They also have food chain lines with Mist Hollow Griffin, and then you can dump it all into the first sliver, keep casting it, as well as Squee over here. And then it also runs Jace instead of Ladman, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure why this specific list is on Jace when they're already on Thoracle, but who knows, maybe there's something I'm missing. And then this is also on Meme Betrayal and Underworld Breach. So you actually got quite a few win cons in this deck, more than you would think. Very cool. The next deck is going to be Timna Dargo. So this is going to be a Turbo Mardu deck. Mardu Summer, right? This deck is all about this card down here. Breached. So this deck is going to try and get out Breach as fast as possible. It's also very, very focused on Bolas Citadel. They have a lot of resurrection effects for Citadel. They have Beseech the Mirror. They have Goblin Engineer. So they're going to try to get Bolas Citadel out as fast as possible. And then they are also running Sensei's Divining Top, which combos with it. But if you'll notice, they're not actually running Aetherflux Reservoir. I guess the thinking being if they're able to draw like 20-30 cards, they're going to win anyway. Aetherflux is going to be a dead card. So there's really no reason to run it. Aside from that, it's a fairly standard turbo list. It's on Pier, of course. It's also on Adnaz. We're running a bunch of fast mana. Running Silence, of course. We are running Defense Grid so that people can't interrupt us on our combo turn. And we're also running things like Beseech the Mirror. A lot of these creatures are actually very interesting, you'll see. So Loyal Apprentice is not a card you see in a lot of decks, but it's very easy to cast, and it makes a lot of good attackers for Timna, which is good when you're in a deck that doesn't have a lot of great attackers for Timna. So like you'll see a lot of these cards can easily be just blocked. So this card actually I think is a pretty smart choice. Next up, we have Winota. And I'm sure we all know what Winota does. But yeah, the whole idea is to get down these efficient creatures, these little stack spare, little rats, and just try to slow down our opponents, try to ramp out Winota as fast as possible, and then don't let anyone do anything with your oppressive stacks pieces here. Soulless Jailer, Spirit of the Labyrinth. There were some interesting-ish cards here, so like Rionia is pretty cool, just in general. Rick is also, I think, a pretty cool card. And then the way we're winning is either through just straight up damage, or we're going to try to go for a Kiki Juki combo with Veil's Conscripts. A cool list here, but pretty standard. Next up, we have Talan. So this is actually the list that had Telepathy. So if I can find it, here it is. I actually really enjoy playing against this player because every time I play against him, he always brings some interesting brew that we haven't seen before. In this case, it was Talan. So Talan is a new card, and whenever an opponent has a spell with mana value, power, toughness equal to chosen number, they lose 2 life, you draw a card. So this card's very powerful because most of the time you're naming 2, and a lot of threats in cEDH and spells in general are going to have 2 mana, like Thoracle, Timna herself is a 2-power creature, lots and lots of different things. So since this card forces you to draw, you are on Thoracle, but you're also going to be on Ladman, and there's another list in the top 4 that's on Jace. So the win cons here are just going to be basically Ladman, Thoracle. I don't really see another way they can win. The last possible thing you could do as a backup plan would be go for damage, because they are running Bloodchief's Ascension, so you could kind of just maybe kill people with that. I believe they are also on Shieldred, yep. So life is going to be very relevant in a game with this commander. And as we've seen before, we're also running a clone effect, which we're seeing more and more of these days. So that was the Talan. I want to talk a little bit also about our top 16 match. It was really interesting. The Italian player was able to play this much later on in the game, and it was very, very game warping. So this was like turn 15 or something, and he played Talan, and he played telepathy, and it revealed the turbo player's hand, it revealed the Kinnon's hand, it revealed my hand. I was in a pretty commanding position for most of that game, and eventually I was able to win through it. Like, man, did this have such a huge impact on the game. Like, the Inala player wasn't able to play almost at all after this resolved because we could see their hand, and they had Peer and Breach, and that was it. And they couldn't even cast the cards because they knew for sure I had a counterspell because my hand was revealed. So, very, very cool card. I definitely recommend trying out, especially if you're on Talan. Very interesting card. Next up, we have Nila. This was a fairly standard Nila list as far as I could tell. Our win cons are going to be Adnos, drop a bunch of cards, Thoracle, or we make a bunch of warriors combo with Derevi and have infinite warriors, or we also have the classic Underworld Breach. Some interesting includes in this list I want to point out. So we have Talan in this list as well, and we have Samut, which is going to be in most Nila lists, or Nila lists. It's going to draw you a bunch of cards. Talan, I guess, is just so good we're putting it in every deck now. So definitely watch out for this card. Next up, we have Rocco. This player actually did do really well. I was pretty impressed with his performance. Unfortunately, he did not make top 4, but I definitely think he could have. So this is going to be a creature-based stacks combo list. The whole goal of this deck is going to be like try to slow down your opponents with stuff very efficient. Hate bears like Archon of Maria, Collector Oof, Gada Fatigue. Actually stopped me from ad nauseing one of the games. Very annoying. And then once we have kind of the board locked down, we're going to go for some sort of combo with Rocco. And Wirewood Symbiote, we're going to try to bounce Rocco. Or we're going to go for Teamer Sabretooth and Dockside. So that's going to make us infinite mana. We also have Kiki-Jiki here, which, as we all know, can make infinite whatevers. There's some really interesting cards here that I haven't seen just in general. There is Catilda, who is kind of a weird card to include, I think. It's going to give your humans, turn them into mana dorks. And also, I guess you can put +1/+1 counters on creatures, so this is going to be good into the late game. But I'm not 100% sure of why exactly this is in here. Another cool card is Yisan, so this is just a really, really powerful piece if the game is kind of going in your favor and you're still able to slow things down. This is just going to fetch a Hate Bear every single turn and eventually turn into a win because you'll just start grabbing combo pieces. So, very cool deck. I definitely recommend checking this list out if you're interested in Rocco at all. Oh, also, Soul Calder is in this deck. Yeah, keep a lookout for this card. It's not just good in Modern, it's good in this format too. And we're also here on Excavation and Food Chain, which is going to combo with Darkside, and this one with Squeak. Next up, we have the top 4. So this is going to be the first Sisei. If you're familiar at all with Sisei, you kind of know what's going on here, but basically you're going to spin Sisei and you try to get a sequence of legendary permanents. One of them being Nicol Bolas, Amanatu, and the last one is going to be Other Teferi. And if you don't know, these 3 combo together, and what do you get? You drop your deck, you kill everybody. So that's kind of how this deck works. This deck definitely looks a lot more combo focused than the other Sisei decks I've seen. We're running both Freed from the Real and Pemazora, which I've never really seen before in a Sisei deck. I'm not a Sisei expert, but definitely seems like an odd include. But it makes sense. Once you're able to make infinite mana, you're able to just pump that all into Sisei, and then you win the game with your legendary combo. Something else to note here is this deck does not have a Thoracle or a Breach in it at all. They are purely trying to win through their legendary combos, through like Dockside and Neil, or Kinnan and artifacts that way. Basalt here. So yeah, something to note, but fairly standard to say list besides that. We'll move on to the next one. This is the third place, my friend Rex. He was on Sisei as well. His deck is, I think, a bit more tuned here. He is on a few interesting cards. So here we can see Talan in the creature zone. We also have Sakuma. We have Oko. And his win con here is also going to be the legendary chain. But as you can see here, he's not on any of the combo enchantments, the freed from the reels, and instead opting for stacks pieces and removal, which makes sense. And also we have this Soul Cauldron, which in a lot of decks and is proving to be very powerful in the format. In second place here we have another Talan deck. This one's going to have Jace instead of Loudman, which is definitely a very interesting include. So their win cons are just going to be Jace and Thoracle. There's really no other way to win unless you Praetor's Grasp or maybe Betrayal someone. But there's no other win cons in the deck. This is a very hard control list. As you'll see, there are a lot of control instants, a lot of counter magic. The goal of this deck is to just try to get out Talan and draw a bunch of cards, make sure no one else can win, and then you just try to go off with one of these two. You have to be very careful if you're going for Thoracle, because someone can actually force you to draw. In the top 4 match that I won, this player actually tried to go off with Jace Demonic Consult. Luckily, I had a Ranger Captain on the field, and I had a Chain of Vapor. So after he consulted, I cracked my Ranger Captain, and I just bounced Jace to his hand with this possibility on the stack. So he was going to draw a card, but he didn't have Jace on the field. So instead of winning the game, he lost the game. But he definitely had a very strong showing. This definitely watch out for this commander. It's actually really good in my opinion. Lastly, we have my deck, Blue Farm, the winner of the tournament. I won't go too crazy in depth. My list is fairly standard. I'm definitely on more of a mid-range package. As you'll see, I have Professional Facebreaker, and my win cons are going to be Underworld Breach, or Thoracle, or maybe try to draw a bunch of cards with Ad Nauseam. And we're going to want to try to leverage our commanders here, try to draw as many cards as possible before eventually assembling the win. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like and a subscribe if you like the video. Send this to a friend, and I'll see you guys next time.